What's going on? Thanks so much for joining me on this ride along video. Today I'm going to be going over frequently asked questions. These are things that come up repeatedly in the comment section, things that come up that I get in private messages, things that come up in forums and whatnot. And hopefully if you're thinking about getting this car, or if you just got this car, you'll kind of get some working knowledge and do a little bit more research on your own. It's not meant to be an in-depth discussion on any of these. I already have a full-length video on a lot of these, and when applicable, I will link up above, and I'll also put links to these videos that are applicable in the description of this video. That being said, if you're interested in this car, be sure to look around my channel. I have a lot of videos that may be of interest to you, and consider subscribing for more content like this. This is installment number 1. If you have any questions that I don't address in this video, put them in the comment section and I may address them in the next video. Without further ado, let's get started. Question number 1, why get a WRX with an automatic transmission? And the first thing I'm going to say about that is that I nor anyone else who owned this car, or any other car for that matter, we don't have any responsibility to answer that question to nobody. Okay, you're the one who bought the car, you're the one who's making the car payments. You shouldn't answer to nobody as to why you chose a particular car. Now, there's a lot of legitimate reasons on why to choose the automatic WRX versus a 6-speed manual version. A lot of people live in areas with a lot of traffic. Maybe you're sharing the car with somebody that does not drive manual transmission. It doesn't mean, as it's commonly thought, that you don't know how to drive a manual transmission. I've had several cars that had manual transmissions. My first car I had a manual transmission. Is the car that I learned to drive. It took me literally one day to drive a manual transmission. I had a 2003 Harley Davidson V-Rod. This is not rocket science, okay? So it's a choice that you make. And if you want to have an automatic car, then have an automatic car. Nobody should tell you or try to convince you otherwise. In fact, a lot of sports cars don't even have manual transmission options. So don't let anybody tell you that a sports car is meant to be driven with a manual transmission. That's not the case at all. A sports car is meant to be driven however you want to drive it. But that leads me into the next question, and the next question is, why did Subaru choose the CVT transmission for the WRX as opposed to another transmission? And one that gets floated around a lot is the dual clutch transmission. Why did Subaru choose the CVT? Well, I can think of a few really good reasons why they chose the CVT. Probably the most important reason is that the Subaru Forester, Outback, and Legacy already had the CVT transmission that the WRX uses. So it's far more economical for Subaru to adapt that transmission to a car than to develop an entire new transmission. That would cost way more money to do. And guess who would end up eating the cost? You as a consumer would end up eating the cost. Also, a dual clutch transmission, all things being equal, is more expensive than a CVT to manufacture. So if they had chosen to develop a whole new transmission or put a dual clutch transmission, then probably they would not have been able to keep the WRX, the automatic WRX, in the same segment as the 6-speed manual WRX, and it would be priced more in line with the STI or above. Those are really good reasons that I can think of why they chose the CVT versus a different transmission in this car. Regardless what the reason, I'm not a spokesperson for Subaru, but regardless what the reason is, the fact of the matter is that the CVT is the transmission that's in the car. That's what we got, and that's what we got to learn to love. Now, I will tell you this, the CVT transmission in the WRX is not your average CVT transmission. Don't think that if you got in a Nissan with a CVT and you hated it, that the experience is the same in the WRX. Not by a long shot. The CVT in the WRX, it's very well executed, and it has internal modifications from its cousins in the other model cars that make it more suitable for a sports car. This car is fun, and I'm gonna leave that there because there's a lot more information that I have in other videos. So Subaru decided to do the CVT, right? So if you have a CVT, why does the transmission fake gears? That's another question that I get a lot. And I did a whole long video on this. Please check it out if you're interested, but I'm gonna give you the condensed answer now. The reason why Subaru decided to put fake gears into the transmission drive modes is, one, to give you a more sporty feel. So if you've been in a CVT before, you know that it could be kind of unnerving experience, especially if you're not used to it. And it's not everybody's cup of tea. To make you feel more at home, so to speak, they put these fake gears and the car feels like it's shifting gears, you know, as it would with a traditional transmission when it doesn't necessarily have to. That being said, there is a very good reason why it does that, good practical reason why it does that, and that's to allow you to get to higher RPMs in a sporty way. So that's a good, easy way that Subaru put in there for you to be able to have that sporty feel, to be able to get the car up to high RPMs, and to be able to keep the car where you want it in the RPM range so you can drive it how you want to drive it. Tied to that, another question that I constantly get is there a way to turn off those fake shift points? Okay, and the short answer to that is no, there is no way to do it. There is 3 ways, however, that you can experience the car without it shifting for you. When you're in sports mode and you have the accelerator pedal pressed less than 30%, the car will not shift. When you are on intelligent mode and you have the accelerator pedal pushed less than 40%, the car will not shift. And finally, if you launch your car using launch control by pushing on the brake and then slamming the accelerator all the way down, then letting go, the car will go to 5,500 RPMs and stay there, and again, it will not shift for you. That's, by the way, the quickest way to drive the car. So if you want to experience the car without shift points, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you have to live with it. And that's also a good segue into the next question that I get all the time. Can I launch the car? Should I launch the car? Those are actually very good but separate questions. Can you launch the car? Yes. You can use launch control, and like I just told you, you can launch the car all day long. Should you launch the car? If your car is stock and you have the proper gas in your car, you have premium gas in your car, and you're past your braking period, then sure, you can launch the car. There's probably not a lot of damage that you will do by doing it every now and then. There's a couple precautions you should take in there though. When you do it, don't stay in that pre-launch mode where you have the gas pedal pushed and then the accelerator pedal push. Don't stay like that. That builds up a ton of heat in the torque converter, that deteriorates your transmission fluid, and that stresses the crap out of your engine components. So don't stay there long, and use it very, very sparingly. And I'll tell you this, if you modify your car and you add power to it, I would highly, highly advise against launching it. You got to remember that when you launch it, you're in a very low RPM, high torque situation, because you're launching a car, you're launching 3,400 pounds from a standstill, and that's when the car requires the most torque, and that's also where this transmission happens to be the weakest. This transmission is not made to be fun from the dig. It's just not, and if you abuse it from the dig, you are going to pay for it. The car is plenty fun without you having to do that. If you really want to launch a car from a standstill and have a car that has tons of torque, and if you really want that, then you should probably get a muscle car or something with a more robust transmission. I'll tell you that right off the bat. This car, you will find the limits of the transmission very quickly if you make it a habit of going out of your way to launch it. So now that we got all that out of the way, another question that comes up a million times over is, how much power can this car handle? And that question is very, very difficult to answer, and you're going to get a lot of different responses, but the general consensus tends to be that around 300 for both torque and horsepower, right, to the wheels. That does come with a caveat, right? You have to be smart about that. Can you modify the car for more power than that? Sure, all day long. You can install just about every part that you can install in the manual version of the car to this car also. And the car will take the modifications, and you can tune it to that. But is the car going to last you if you do that? Probably not. Okay, probably not. So you have to be smart about it. And if you do install these parts that allow the car to go much more beyond 300, then you need to tune it down, right? You need to make sure that you have a very conservative tune. Just because you have all that power available doesn't mean you should use it. Doesn't mean it's smart to use it. But the general consensus is that around 300, you can have a very, very fun car. 300 in this car is more than adequate for you to have a blast in it. If you really want to build a car much faster than that, then I would recommend you get a car with a more robust transmission. So, the STI or even the 6-speed manual. In the 6-speed manual, you can get, maybe 50 more or whatnot. But for this car, if you push it much further than 300, you might be asking for trouble, especially if you don't take the precautions that you should, like installing a CVT cooler and doing some other modifications to help the engine and the transmission. Air oil separator, EGR, TGV deletes. So to summarize that, go ahead. You get the car, you want to modify it. You can install all these parts, But when it comes down to your tune, you make sure that you add the power at the higher RPMs, and you make sure that you stay away from launching your car, and you make sure you don't add too much more than 300, and then you can have a car that's fast, that's fun, and that is relatively safe. Now there's always going to be people who will blow a car that is stock, and there's always going to be people who have 400 horsepower and their car is perfectly fine for 50,000-60,000 miles. You just don't know how people drive their cars, so don't take one person's experience as gospel. Make sure you do your research and make sure you're smart about what you're doing with a car. So I mentioned the CVT cooler in there. Should I get a CVT cooler is another question that comes up repeatedly. Should you get a CVT cooler? That highly depends. I did a whole video on this. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's because I've made a whole lot of videos about the CVT. But I've made actually 2 videos on the CVT cooler, but I'm gonna give you the condensed version here. Okay, should you get a CVT cooler? It depends on where you're at, and it depends how you drive your car. Okay, if you live in a very cold area and you use your car as a daily driver, you probably don't need a CVT cooler. It's probably smarter for you not to get a CVT cooler, especially if you didn't modify your car in such a way as to possibly deny you a warranty claim by tuning it. Why do I say that? Because if you install a CVT cooler, then you're putting yourself at risk of a warranty claim being denied if your transmission does happen to go. I know this all sounds gloom and doom, but it's really the reality of modding and paying to play. If that were the case and that was to happen, can you go to Subaru of America and fight the case? Yes, you absolutely can, and you may win, but it's going to be a battle. It can be a battle. I'm not going to say it's going to be. It can be a battle, and it's not going to be worth it if you do not modify for power. Okay, a good way to know to answer this question is to monitor your CVT. Okay, monitor your CVT. I have a video on how to do that, and I'm going to link to it. But monitor your temperature, your CVT temperature, and see how high you're getting on a daily basis. So if you get up in the morning, you get in your car, and then you go to work, by the time you get to work, your transmission fluid is up to 120 degrees, right? You work for 8 hours, you get back in your car, go back home, and the same deal. And that's basically all you do all week long. You absolutely do not need a CVT cooler. You don't, because your transmission temperature is not even getting high enough for you to warrant getting one to begin with. However, on the other flip side of that, if you live in Florida and you work far away from home, and by the time you get to work, your transmission temperature is 190 degrees, then you would probably benefit from a CVT cooler, because your fluid will deteriorate at a slower rate, so you can get more life out of your transmission in that scenario. Check out that video for more information on this very, very important topic. Another very important question, and also a very hotly debatable topic, is can I put regular in the car? And you guessed it, I do have a whole video on it. Short answer here is, if you buy this car, yes, you can put regular, as per the manual, you can put regular Octane 87 in the car, okay? The reason why you can is because this car has a direct injected engine, and that means that cylinder temperatures are lower and the car can handle the higher compression ratios that it has. And also the car has a very aggressive anti-knock strategy. And that means that if the car detects knock in any way, shape, or form, it immediately messes with the timing and readjusts. If you use 87 in this car, like if you decide that you want to use 87, or that you must because it's the only thing available in your area, know that you're going to take a big hit in power. And 0 to 60, that's about a second that you're going to leave at the door. That's a noticeable difference. So I would suggest that if you're keeping the car stock and you're not abusing it, then you should probably do mid-grade, at least mid-grade. You shouldn't do 87, you should probably do mid-grade. The car is happier and healthier with higher octane fuel, and that's because it allows that fuel mixture to get hotter before it detonates, okay, so you don't have pre-detonation. If you modified your car in any way, for power anyhow, I would highly advise against using an 87. You have to understand one thing about everything I just said. The strategy that the car uses is reactive, and that means that it's not going to pull timing unless it detects the knock, and by then you already had the knock. Now, the knock that it detected is probably very mild, is probably very benign. If it detects it to begin with, it pulls the timing to prevent damage. So to prevent that from happening at all, you use the higher octane fuels to begin with. If you modify for power, you should use the highest fuel available in your area. And no matter what fuel you use in your car, make absolutely certain that the tune that you have installed in it is for that fuel. So if you have a tune for 93, you make sure that you put 93 in the car. And if you can't find 93, then tune it down to 91 or 87 or whatever the case might be. Make sure that you tune for the fuel that it's available in your area that you're putting in your car. Another question that is a very common question is, will modding void my warranty? Nothing voids your warranty in a blanket way. Let me just say that first. That's not the way that warranty works. The Magnuson-Moss Act prevents a dealer from doing that. They have to prove that whatever modification you installed in your car caused the failure. So when you do a warranty claim, you're not doing a warranty claim on the whole car. You're doing a warranty claim on whatever failed. So, you know, for example, if you have faulty wipers, you haven't installed a tune and your engine has nothing to do with that. So you should not be denied for that. They have to ultimately prove that your modification was the cause of the failure. So that's the very short answer. For failures of the engine and transmission that are not obviously external, like, you know, something leaking or something like that, if you tune your car, even if it's stage 1, you're putting yourself at risk. You're putting yourself at risk because you are tuning out of the parameters that the car was designed for. Even if the car can handle it just fine, even if your tune is very conservative, you're putting yourself at risk. Now, there's a couple of sides to this. When you take your car to the dealer to do a warranty claim, it's not the dealer who's paying for the repair work. So in this case, your relationship with the dealer has a huge bearing on whether they're going to give you a hard time or not. But ultimately, Subaru of America can request your ECU to be sent to them, and once they do some intrusive checks in it, they'll be able to tell that you modified your car, that you tuned it, and they can deny your claim. So just know that there's that term that you'll hear over and over, which is pay to play, and just know that you put yourself at risk. So if you want to modify your car, that's a risk that you have to be willing to take. So that's going to be it for this video. Like I said before, if you have any questions that I did not address in this video, put them in the comments section and maybe I'll address them in the next video. I do have a list of other stuff that I'm going to cover, but I want to keep these videos, you know, to a reasonable time. And a lot of these things that I cover, I'm also going to do their own dedicated videos on. So if you are interested in this car or already own this car, consider subscribing. And if you have already subscribed, I thank you very much. I thank you all for watching, and take care.